Hey, how's it going? And today we're taking a look at creating an in-game UI in Fortnite editor. And we're basically just following this, creating an in-game UI right here. I don't know about Verse yet. It seems like it's not that, I want to say it's a little harder than Python. It seems a little more unforgiving. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through this part of the tutorial right here on adding a widget. And so I had to kind of stumble my way through it, but I finally got it working. So this is what we end up with. I did a tutorial on how to navigate between the editor and the Fortnite creative mode. And so right now we're in the editor, and if I just hit start game, I can jump down here on the bottom of my screen here, and here's the game starting. This is really super basic, but I do like this intro here. I feel like this is how I should start every morning. I wish I could fly into work like this, come right through the roof. It does seem like a great way to start the morning. Just falling through space just seems like a great way to come in kind of with some dramatic flair. Okay, so here we are. This is ridiculously simple. So all this is adding a widget. There's our button device right there. We're just going to walk up to it and we hit E. And all it's going to do is in the upper left corner, it's just going to say hello world. So that's it. And of course it could say, I think that is editable, but I'm not even messing with that right now. So I'll be back in just a minute and we'll get started on this. Hey, we're back. And so we're going to get started here. I'm starting from scratch. There's quite a few steps and a lot of little gotchas along the way. So if it seems kind of tedious and difficult, that's because that's the way the documentation is. Because I'm literally just following the documentation. So anyway, we're going to library and we'll open our Unreal editor for Fortnite. In experimenting with this, to be completely honest with you, at least my initial impression of it is I'm not sure how mainstream Verse is going to go, because it actually just seems relatively esoteric or arcane. It doesn't seem like, it seems pretty darn quirky, and it's so tied into the Verse API. It's basically Verse and Fortnite editor. It's like all just its own language just for that program. So I don't know how much applicability this is going to have outside of this. We'll see. I don't know, but to be honest with you, it seems more difficult than Python. Okay, so anyway, we're going to just go into feature examples, and we're going to go to Verse starter device, and we'll just leave it called My Project M and go create. This is like the 5th time I've started doing this tutorial, and each time I've gotten hung up on a particular step. And so, okay, so now what that just did was create a Verse class. So this, if we click into this folder, this is a Verse class. And this is our own level here. We've got our own level here. This is our level, and that's our game data. And it created what's called a device, but it's also a Verse class. So it's a device. And what we want to do now is, and this is following straight from the documentation, is we want to create a new device, and basically that's essentially a Verse class. So how do we do that? I have absolutely no idea. No, I'm kidding. We're going to come up here to Verse. I'm going to close that for right now. We're going to come up here to Verse and go Verse Explorer, and that just opens what I just closed. And we're going to click on the project name, Project M. We're going to right click and add new Verse file to project. And here I'm just going to call this My First Button, and we'll go create. And so now we've created another Verse class. So this is one Verse class, and that's another Verse class. And if we click into this gives us opens Visual Studio, and that's basically our code right there. Okay, for our Verse class. But before we get carried away, this is kind of what happened to me before, is I want to go up here and go Verse Explorer, click on this, and then I want to go build Verse code. And now it's created this second Verse class. So now we've got these two manifestations of this. Now to activate this, all we have to do is just drag this onto the scene. Or you know what? I don't think it's that one, it's this one. That's the one we need to drag on the scene. Okay, now this verse class, what's interesting is if we look over here in the details panel, it gives us our options. So basically I want to say instantiate or make this workable and communicatable with other devices in the game, you've got to bring it into the game. And that way it can make references to all the other objects in the game. So you don't want this actually visible in the game. So it's kind of weird. So you have the option here to turn it off. So that's what we would do when it came to gameplay. We would turn this off so no one would see it. No one would even know it's there. And people would walk right through it. So, but that's what we need to do to get started with all this whole thing. And now you'll see when we go to add our button, our connection to our button, and let's just go ahead and do that right now. If I come into devices and I search for a button right here, we're going to drag that onto the scene. And this is basically our button. So I'll hit the space bar and I'll just turn this toward us. And there's our button that we're going to interact with. I'll drag it up a little tiny bit higher. Okay, so there's our button. And when we press it, it's going to say hello world. That's all it's going to do. But you'll see all the process that we have to go to get to that level. Just look what we've had to do so far. So we've got our two verse classes. This one is kind of our base one, and this is our second one that kind of tagged along. And now we've dragged that into the scene. And now we can, if we double click into this, we can start editing our actual code. Okay, now we don't need this because that's some old language error, and I guess it's lighting up because we don't really have any code in here right now. So now back to the documentation. I'm just gonna get rid of that. So we're gonna start now. We're basically in the documentation. We're kind of at step 3, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna add an editable button device property to our first class and set up a reference to our button device. And in the documentation, it really wasn't clear how you do that. So, but what we got to do is we got to go well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We've got to bring in a couple additional libraries. So first up here, I'm gonna hit Shift and End, and I'm gonna go Control C, come down to the 5th line, go Control V, come down to the 6th line, go Control V, and then up here we're going to change. So these are basically references to our verse API. So, or almost like the SDK, you can think of it as. So one of these is going to be the UI, capital letters, uppercase. And then the next one is going to be to spatial math. Spatial math. And it has to be spelled exactly with exactly that camelback casing, or it won't work. And then we're going to come up here where it says using Fortnite, hold Shift, End, Control C, come down to the 7th line here, Control V, and we just got to make a connection to U, capital I. And those are all the libraries that we need. And we're set there. And as long as nothing's turning red, we're good to go. Okay, so now we're right where we need to be. And unlike Python, indentation doesn't really matter here. Okay, so now, like I said, the first thing we're going to do is add, this is step 3 from the documentation, add an editable button device property to our verse class, which this is, and set up the reference to that in the level. So I'll show you how we do that in just a second. So at first we're going to go at, and we're going to go editable, hit the arrow down, arrow key. It doesn't matter what you call it here because this is just going to appear in the details panel. And so we can just call this my button reference, and then colon, and then we're going to go button underscore device equals button. Oh, there it is right there. We can just hit tab or click on it, and then curly brackets right there. Okay, and we'll come back later and set that in the reference. So we're just going to keep going now. So right down here we've got our on, begin, play. There's only one UI per player, and we'll need a reference to the player to be able to access their UI. So this shows how to do that. So we're going to go on, begin, override, suspends void, And here we've got to, I guess I should change this name shorter because we're going to be referencing this, so I'll just leave it called My Button. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go My, there it is right there, hit tab, My Button, period, and we're going to write interacted with event, and then period, subscribe, and then parentheses, handle button interaction. And we'll be getting back to that. It's turning red because we haven't finished up the code on that yet. So I'm going to come down, and actually I'm going to come back out a little bit here, and we're going to go ahead and take care of that right now. And so the UI can only be associated with a specific player, so we've got to do that right now. And so we'll go handle button interaction parentheses agent colon lowercase agent in parentheses colon void equals. Okay, and that takes care of that. You can just go ahead and save this right now, or I could have done Control S. And we've just got a few more lines of code to do here. Actually, not very many at all. So now we can call the available function called getPlayerUI using an if expression to get a reference to the player's UI. So I guess you can think of this as what used to be called as casting. So there's actually, all we have left, believe it or not, is just 3 lines of code. So I'm just going to try to blast through this real fast here. So it's just if parentheses in player is, and this is colon equals, which is the assignment operator, player, and this is brackets, agent, oops, that's supposed to be brackets, bracket, agent, comma, I believe that's comma, yep, comma, and then player UI, and then the assignment operator again, get player UI, bracket, in player, tab. This can be a little tricky here because there's a parentheses and then there's a colon. So it's parenthesis and then a colon. Oh, there's a colon. Okay, and then its last right here is my UI, colon, text underscore block equals text underscore block curly bracket default text, assignment operator is colon equals, and then text for my UI, and then enter, and the last line of code is player tab period add widget my UI. So this is just, I'm not sure why I'm getting a line here for that. So let me just see here. Oh, I missed a line of code up here. Sorry about that. And that is, we have to go text for my UI, and this is that, and this is going to be localizes, close that up, localizes colon, oh, this is where we input our message. Message equals verse is not that easy to learn. I think that's it. Oh, not message. Message. Okay, and as you can see, we don't have any errors. Thank goodness. So what we're going to do now is we're really on the home stretch. That's all the code. So if you want to get a screenshot of this, you just have to literally suffer your way through all this, figuring out what all this is doing. And I had really hoped that they would have a node-based system, but apparently there's not going to be a node-based system for this. That's probably maybe too much. So we'll just save this, and we can minimize this window, and then we can go build and build verse code, and we didn't get any errors. Oh, what I was going to show you is now up here on this level, if we click here, you see this is where we make our reference. So we called it my button here, and then we just connect it to my button, and that completes our reference. So now this button can speak to that line of code that we just finished creating. So when we play test this, it's going to say the message that I wrote down, and that's it. So here we go. We're just going to go ahead and launch session, and we have to save what we've done, and let's see how it goes. Let's see what happens. And like I said, I've hid this in the game, so we won't see this. We're not supposed to see it, and that's why we have the option to turn it off. But it's just the way that they've designed this. So the session is loading. This is another thing that takes a lot of time. But this is, how you learn. You just learn by learning one little thing at a time. You learn how to do a button and print to the screen, and then you just add another function to it and another function to it. And then once you get familiar with the Verse API and more familiar with the language, hopefully it'll all start making more and more sense how it all fits together. But definitely in the beginning, it's not that, I want to say it's really not that intuitive, and there's quite a bit to know. And like I said, it's so deeply tied to the Verse API. I mentioned this in the first tutorial of all this that we have to go through in the very beginning, this kind of lag time between the setup, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. There's definitely a lot to take in and a lot to learn. I guess we're all learning. And the thing too is this is all in beta, and so okay, gosh, we're finally here, huh? Okay, so there's our button right there, and we can still see everything. So we're in the editor mode right here right now. So we'll just go. I hit escape. Now we'll start the game. Can you believe all the work this was just for just to get a button that prints a message on the screen? Okay, let's see. Here we go. So we don't see. The only thing that should be down there is the button. It's hard to see. There it is. I see it right there. That's the only thing on the screen. Look at this. E to interact. Verse is not that easy. And that's it. Well, thanks for hanging in there, and keep up the faith, all right? I'll talk to you next time.